Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we'll be talking about season 4 of the show Only Murders in the Building. Fun fact, all the episodes this season share their name with a famous film. This season came out in 2024 and stars Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Selena Gomez, and was created by Steve Martin and Josh Hoffman. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. Only Murders in the Building, Season 4, sees a trio getting a movie made about them, and while that's exciting, they stumble across the murder of Charles's good friend Saz, and they must figure out who killed Saz and why. Only Murders in the Building is a comedic whodunit. It has similar vibes to Knives Out, Poker Face, or The White Lotus. Only Murders has been a highlight since it premiered and has done something that not many shows these days can say that they have done. Give us quality seasons year after year instead of making us wait these long periods in between seasons. The last season wasn't as good as seasons 1 and 2, but this season came back swinging. Also, let me just point out when I say that it wasn't as good, let me just be clear and say that I still thought it was good. It just was a dip below the other seasons. The trio works well together, and then they bring in these other supporting cast members who just do well in their roles. The show always has celebrities thrown into the mix who are just playing themselves, and I always like to see who it's going to be. In this season, a film is being made about the main characters' lives, so the celebs that we meet this season are the actors who are going to be playing these characters in that movie. It was great to see these actors try to mirror these characters and their mannerisms. The celebs try to help to solve the murder, but most of the time they end up just kind of being in the way. While the argument can be made that they did not help solve Saz's murder, they did kind of help solve the Dudenoff murder. Steve Martin portrays Charles, who is a part of the trio solving murders on their podcast. This season puts a little bit more of the limelight on him, considering the person who is killed is his best friend Saz Pataki, and he really wants to solve her murder. While exploring who might have killed her, he learns more about her and how much she cared for him, and how she was trying to build a better future for herself. With the way that Saz died, there was no body, and Charles even repays the favor by letting the stunt people mourn her by using his body as a replacement for hers. Eugene Levy is playing him in the movie adaptation, and it was funny to see them considering Eugene Levy is playing himself as an actor, and Charles in the show is also an actor. Out of all the actors, I felt that they respected each other the most, but it was funny to see Eugene try to figure out Charles's mannerisms. I'm glad to see Charles try so hard to figure out who killed his friend, and it was funny to see that Jan also dated Saz and wanted to find the killer as well. We meet Charles' sister Doreen this season, played by Melissa McCarthy, and I squealed with excitement, partly because of Melissa, but also because I love it when she plays a character that lets her have this different look. She was hilarious, and her house was so creepy with all of these dolls everywhere. She goes after Oliver, which leads to some hilarious scenes with him and a little fight with Loretta. Charles and she had a rocky relationship due to her just feeling alone, and they made up at the end of the episode, which was nice to see. The dip-obsessed Oliver is played by Martin Short, who not only makes me laugh, but is also getting married this season. Oliver is being played by Zach Galifianakis in the film adaptation, and it's so funny how they hate each other when the podcasters meet who is playing them. Mabel and Charles know their actors, but Oliver doesn't, which leads to a hilarious interaction. And I think my favorite part is when Oliver asks Zach if he was in the Home Alone films. Zach didn't want to take this role, but they eventually will learn to respect each other a little bit over the course of the season. Oliver loves being in the limelight, which leads to some scenes with him being over dramatic, and he is also trying to retain the youth that he has, which is just hilarious to me. He is marrying Loretta, who is played by the always magnificent Meryl Streep, and goes through so much worrying because he is nervous about the wedding and does crazy stuff like creating a Finsta to make sure she's not seeing anyone else. He often says stuff that seems like it's a lie, and a lot of the times it is, but some are true, and it's hard to tell. Towards the end of the season, he says that he knows Ron Howard, and I was sure that that was a lie because, one, it just seemed so weird that him and Ron Howard had this whole little playful banter. And then, two, Ron Howard wouldn't pop up, and I was wrong because he did know Ron Howard, and Ron even made a cameo in the show. He marries Loretta in the finale, which is lovely, at the Arcania, which is where they met, even though he could have had it somewhere fancier. I forgot that they both had a son until they were walking Loretta down the aisle. He was going to move to New Zealand with Loretta at the end of the season, where she's filming her show, but she sees how much he enjoys the Arcania and his friends, and she tells him to stay here and then just come and visit because they're at a different place in their life and they're just both happy. Loretta is played by Meryl Streep, and her role is much smaller than the last season, but it's always a joy to see her. I love her relationship with Oliver and how it isn't your typical relationship because they are at different points in their life and they understand that about each other. At first, I felt like she overlooked his crazy real quick, but then I remembered she was a little crazy last season too, so they just kind of matched each other's freak. Mabel is played by Selena Gomez, and she rounds out the trio and is the youngest and the one who is more up to date with the way that things are done in society. She brings a different perspective, which helps with solving the murder, and she is also great with the behind the scenes technology with the podcast. She is very hesitant to sign her life away for this film, which is fair because it's scary to have to make that decision. I feel like she embodies what a lot of young people feel like, not knowing what they want to do professionally, yet constantly being asked while dealing with not being able to afford real estate or even own an apartment. In the movie adaptation, they age her up because they think the age gap is weird, so she is played by Eva Longoria, who doesn't seem to really understand Mabel, which also seems to irritate her because she interferes with Mabel's detective work. She really throws herself into the case and squats in the apartment the killer was in, which I think is the show's solution to making sure she stays at the Arcania. Mabel has this dry humor that makes me laugh, and I think Selena does great in this role. I'm always interested to see her perspective on what's going on. Divine Joy Randolph didn't appear much in this season, but in the scene she was in, she stole the show as Detective Williams. I just love how she is familiar with the group and how trouble seems to follow them and refuses to listen to whatever explanation they have. She is a no nonsense person and gets straight to the point, but you can tell she appreciates the trio and the help that they have given to capture so many murderers. Howard is a funny addition, and I love how he's a little bit sassy, but also ends up being much more helpful than you might think. He was very instrumental in helping figure out what happened to Dudenoff and is the perfect pet sitter in case you need one. This season, we meet some of the residents of the other side of the Arcania called the Westies, who rent instead of own. It was interesting meeting them, and I love how they were used to distract us from who the killer was that killed Saz, at least. We learned that the apartment from which Saz was killed was Professor Dudenoff's apartment, but he's not there, and there's this rumor that he is in Portugal. We later find out that he was the brother sisters teacher who were the directors of the movie. And then we learn that a piece of metal that was in his body was found with Saz's ashes. We think that the Westies did both murders when we find that they cash his checks, but we find out that he was dying and wanted to make sure the Westies had somewhere to live, so he killed himself and asked them to keep it a secret. Another Westie by the name of Helga, who was out of the loop, thought that they killed him, but he left her a video saying what really happened and how he didn't really want to hurt her, so he just didn't tell her. It was cool that he was looking out for these people, even though, he was very sick. And even though two people died this season, they weren't really connected, even though they both happened in the building. The Westies were a weird group of people, but it was a fun addition to the cast and really helped throw us off the scent of who the actual killer of Saz was. Saz is played by Jane Lynch, and she is the person whose murder we are trying to solve this season. Saz pops up in prior seasons, and as a Glee lover, it was always nice to see Jane Lynch, and she is hilarious, and she is Charles's best friend and stunt double. I felt that while we learn more about Saz and her murder, we are also learning more about stunt people and exploring her murder weirdly felt like paying homage to stunt people, which I kind of loved. We see how doing stunts is something Saz realizes that she can't do forever. How she sees how stunt people are vital but are treated as less than when it comes to the star and the director, and tries to make something, a script, that isn't in her normal realm of work. Even with all of this going on, she never inconvenienced Charles and always put on a happy face when she was with him and hid her pain, which was sad to see when we saw what her future plans were. It's sad that she didn't get to fulfill them at all. The one thing about this show is that while they focus on solving a murder, they also give us a parallel story of what happened in the past that really puts things into perspective and shows the victim's life leading up to their murder from their perspective, which makes their murder even more gut wrenching. I think when talking about Saz, they juggled being comedic and being serious really well. I love learning more about this character, and I love the send off that Charles had with her ghost at the end. Jin Ha plays Marshall, aka Rex, who is the murderer. I love how he was helping solve the murder, even though it was him, and he knew all the info that they had and how much they were struggling to find the murderer. When we learn about everything leading up to us meeting him, we see how he was able to commit this crime and get rid of the body by himself, even though it was thought that it was a team of people, but we learn that it's partly because of what stunt people do and how they have this ability to not be afraid of certain things. The one complaint I had about this character is that I wish he was in the show a little bit more because I felt that he came in late and he was a character that I didn't put much thought into because he wasn't there long enough before he would disappear. And then it was sad that he felt the way he had to appease his family was to steal and murder instead of doing his own thing. One of the most shocking things is the fact that Jan, out of all people, ends up being the one that kills him in the end because Jan was going to get her payback, and she definitely did. This show is dedicated to making this building a murder building, and I thought I would get annoyed, but at the end of the season, I'm always like, bring on the next one. It's interesting because with each murder, we learn more about the building itself. Every time we go somewhere outside of the building, it feels like we're on a field trip, and I just know that we will be back soon enough. Taya Leone pops up in the finale, which shocked me because Fun with Dick and Jane was one of my comfort movies, and they deny her request to look into who killed her husband because it wasn't in the building, and then we come to find out that Lester, the doorman, has been killed. I already have a feeling that those two murders are connected, and I just can't wait to see how. My favorite part of this season has to be the banter between the three leads. It's funny to see Charles and Oliver playfully bickering and Mabel being the one to be like, okay, we have stuff to do. Mabel has some time to explore on her own, and we see Oliver and Charles together, and we see how they are besties, which is nice to see. The characters bicker back and forth about a variety of things, but at the end of the day, they care for each other deeply. And when Mabel is in trouble, they even walk on a ledge that is very high up to get to her and to save her. One of the highlights, not just in this season, but across the board, is just how well these characters work together and bounce off of each other. I think that seeing these three just created gold for a show, and I can't wait to see them return for another season and see all the banter and also seeing how they are slowly realizing that they are a very close knit group of friends and they all deeply care for each other. It's just lovely to see. Only Murders in the Building season 4 is fantastic and had me laughing while trying to figure out who was the murderer. The cast is great and the story draws you in. It really makes you feel like you are a part of the trio trying to solve the crime. Thank you for watching my video. I would love to hear thoughts down below in the comments. If you haven't subscribed, please do so you can keep up to date with more of my videos. But besides that, everyone stay safe, have fun, and goodbye.